There were no keys. I was just thrown into a big black hole, right? And they said, go and get it done.
It's that old man talking also.
Excuse me, you cannot use that word.
We have only young and young at heart.
Yeah.
I had to whisper to Adi, why is everybody dressed in black?
Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning into ArchitectuREAL, a special edition marking 20 years of Archifest. I'll be your host. My name is Razvan Gilikmiku, and I'm really excited to welcome to the podcast Siachi Huang, Siuman Kop, Adib Jalal, and Stella Gui.
Hi.
Now that we have warmed up and we have before the session, I know you have lots of things to say, but the first one is really about digging a little bit deeper. And I want you to be candid and vulnerable if possible. What did it actually feel like to be handed the keys to Archifest?
Who should go first?
Yes.
The youngest will start.
The youngest will start.
There were no keys. I was just thrown into a big black hole, right? And they said, go and get it done. Yeah.
And so you have. Can you
Yeah,
share
for
a little
2
bit
years.
more of how
And just to recall some of the memorable moments, sitting in front of a panel of people in URA asking for money, please help. But I think clearly it was a good initiative to bring the awareness of architecture, across the entire island. And I think some of the ideas that still, endears today is like the Architours, where we decide to bring the public along to come and appreciate some of the, celebrated works of architects all over Singapore. And I think it's been a very popular program since the first edition, right?
It's still going really strong. It's one of the main anchors of it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing was about bringing in regional architects to exchange ideas. I remember during my time, the very first one was a very young Ma Yen Song,
Yes.
And look how successful he is today, right? But I remember his speech that he has not much things to do, so he made a fish bowl that looked at his shape to keep his goldfish, and it turned out to be one of his projects later on.
Wow. So it all started with Archifest, and it's interesting because you started it, so you had no keys, you had no door, so you forged keys and you built a door, and through that door a few years later walked the gentleman next to you. I'm curious to get your...
Yes, I handed over in very good hands.
If I may, just to add to what Mangkok had shared, so I had the privilege to be part of Mangkok's team. So of course I had this chance to learn from a big brother mentor. And what's wonderful is really working with like-minded peers to allow us to curate the discourse of architecture, to really look deeper into subjects that's close to our hearts. I think this was at that point of time really quite important. It's also a means of how we look at not just sustaining but reawakening passion for architecture. So because sometimes our professions can be quite tough, and I thought at a point of time it was also a great platform where we re-energize not just ourselves but really profession, and of course hopefully to further infect in a positive way the larger community. And like Mangkok said, I recall when we first started, it was, I must say, SIA amongst the region was the originator of this idea of architectural festival. Because post that it became really successful, that even our neighboring countries or allied partners in the region, Malaysia started their version of Dayton, ASA had their also own version of festival. So that's like testament to the good works that my dear friend and of course the team predecessors of the committee leads of Archifest have started. There were a few key things, Mangkok. I remember we spoke about what were models of festival. Venice was one. Even then, Sao Paulo Biennale was also one of the references. But we were quite clear we wanted to create something that it's also meaningful for Singapore, for our architectural and design community, and of course for our general public. Can I just make the conversation really serious? It's meant to be fun. It's like old man talking.
Excuse me, you cannot use that word.
Oh, sorry.
We have only young and young at heart.
Yeah, young and
right?
young.
And hopefully a very young audience watching, hoping, and just determined to be the next directors of Archifest and take it forward. I think what's amazing for me, because when I had the privilege of doing my service in 2021, there was quite a lot of history to Archifest, and there was a structure, and a lot of it I think crystallized in a way from those early kind of incipient events into things that were already tradition. But that tradition and this grouping is not haphazard. It's really around your individual contributions and all your teams, because I know you all had wonderful teams supporting you, and we'll get to that in a second. But I feel like those first 7 years really innovated, because there wasn't a blueprint, there weren't keys. You were designing, drawing, testing, piloting the blueprint as it happened. So we heard about some of the initial steps, about the conference, the Architours, the model, and then you two entered the frame. And you kept innovating. So why don't you share some of those early first steps for you?
So by the time I got it, there was a house, right? It wasn't an empty slate. So it was also a moment of, it's quite scary to take over the keys to this thing that's been carefully built over the past 7-8 editions. A sense of responsibility, but it's also a moment where the brief given to me was, how do we do better now, right? What's the next stage of evolution of Archifest? And how do we expand it to an even larger audience? Because like what Chi Huang mentioned, the seed was already there, it was growing, so how do we take it to the next step? So I think that was the reason why when Stella and I took over, we made quite big moves, right? Because we imagined that this could be the foundation for the next wave, right? For the next bound. So things like changing, reimagining what the logo could be, right? So like, okay, this has worked, but what does it mean when you want to set it up for the next 10 years, right? So like, what could that logo be? We started thinking about the pavilion, so taking that seed that Chi Huang and team planted, so like, okay, what would that next iteration be? So we imagined saying, oh, could this be a platform to allow young architects to build, right? Or could it be a hub that you can really feel what Archifest is about, right? Could this be a symbol that everybody can remember that this year Archifest equals this pavilion? So we started toying with those ideas, and then of course we took the seed of the conference, the tours, and we just stretched it a bit more. So it was responsibility to carry on, and also plant new seeds.
Yes.
And yeah, it was exciting, but really scary.
So on.
And also, if I could add on, I think when Adib started talking to me about Archifest, I remember, because I guess I'm the only non-architect that came in, and the very
you're
first...
not wearing the uniform.
Yes, the very first meeting, I had to whisper to Adib, why is everybody dressed in black? But I think there was observations back then that I also wanted, because one of the mandate was, how can we bring architecture and have it be more accessible, right? To debunk the myth that architecture is so serious, that architecture is so straight-laced, or
one
solving very serious.
Architecture is elitist, and I hear that.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we with the pavilion came also the questions that I had. What do architects do for fun? And I remember that came into the programming. So with the pavilion, I did drew up this crazy brief, a zero waste pavilion. So I remember in 2012, we went outdoor. So I think Chi Huang, you mentioned earlier, it was sheltered, but I think it became another life. But when we went outdoor, it was also interesting because we were at Foothills, Fort Canning, for 2012, and then Dobie got green, and we had to grapple with even things that we didn't know. I think like Mangkok earlier, there were no manual that we had to follow. We kind of like just went through that whole process and just learning, and we brought in so many different groups. We featured, Theodore was then the president. I remember Theodore played in a band and he performed for our launch, I think, in 2012.
Wonderful.
So this helps to kind of bridge the accessibility to say, what is architecture as a profession mean? and how are the more serious topics and the impact. And I think importantly, as a community, you actually have a role to play in, shaping the city. It's not just the role of an architect. I think that was the early few years that we built on the work that Mangkok and Shi Huang has done.
And I think you hit on something that's really important, not just for the Archifest organizing team, but for the long-lasting memory of a festival. It's relevance, right? Because I feel like we've all starting to take for granted that biennales happen, that festivals happen, but that the switch can be turned off just as easily. And a lot of times in our conversations, and even every single year with SIA, there's always that review of the relevance of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's important in many ways, in the way that whoever's listening and watching, to think of your years not just in a bubble, but also relative to what was happening in Singapore,
Yes.
in the region, and in the world, because it's really easy to take for granted the fact that you have or you don't have a pavilion, easy to take for granted the fact that you have international speakers, because it's been done, and in 2026 is an expectation. But I think that relevance to its baseline is really important to acknowledge.
Yeah.
So perhaps that idea of relevant to its audience, I'd love to hear more around whom did you imagine your specific audience was in the year that you organized the festival? What were you hoping they would take away from the festival? And if you have a gut feel of whether you managed to fulfill some of whatever you set out to do.
Yeah.
But I think what is, I suppose, consistent, I can sense and see that for Archifest, it has done something very important and very meaningful for the whole community, and actually for Singapore in general, is that before Archifest, imagine before Archifest, you do not have any so-called celebration or public exhibition of such nature. SIA is always closed-door event, right, for architects, and SIA design and all that. But I think Archifest is the first event whereby the fraternities step up to engage. And not just engaging the public, actually we have to engage many government agencies.
Yes.
We design from toilet cubicles, right, all the way to like mega airports. So you just imagine the kind of things you need to know, you need to be sensitive to. But I think I can see that there are a lot of very good things that already become important traditions that we can continue. Architours, the pavilions, exchange of ideas with regional and international speakers, giving a chance for our young architects to showcase their work and their dreams, because I think you want to sense that vitality and energy from a younger generation, right? Because if you think about architecture, one work take at least about 4 or 5 years, right? And how many 4 or 5 years do you have in your career? Correct. So I think if we are to help to enrich this whole process and the tapestry, I think is for us past festival directors to give feedback and to give a sense of perspective, looking back, what is really quite important and an achievement that we should continue,
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Mangkok spoke of the energy, and I think that's really what it was for the years, at least when we were organizing. There was this bubbling energy, like we said earlier, there was no social media. You have to be in real life, attending, and we were capturing these discussions back in 2012, 2013, the different groups. I didn't know a lot of different interesting groups, and then when we wanted to further that conversation to outside of architecture, so I came in, bringing the networks from film, arts, music, and all these creative communities. And I think that conversation, the spirit of that, regardless whether there's a pavilion or the program format, how do we build that space? How do we maintain this bubbling energy? And I think it's even more relevant now as people are being isolated more and more from the fact that the phone is our connector. How do we build that space for everyone to be able to facilitate that conversation, to convene and inspired. I think we talk about it's just important, right? This magic age we were discussing, like between 30s, like in your 30s, to do this when you still have the energy. Willing
We
to
all,
just
what the
try
Hokkien say,
everything.
唔在see, you know.
Absolutely, and just tracing some of the names that are recurring in the festival, not just the festival director themselves, but the people who were part of many teams. Actually, your name, Ji-Huang, has come up several times.
Oh, God.
You were kind of the front person, the sort of the vocal, but a lot of times you also play rhythm guitar on Architect, figuratively speaking, not like theater.
You're not Theodore.
And I'd love to hear your reflection on having actually witnessed a good chunk, a quarter of the life of the festival with your hands on the dials, whether in support or in the lead. In those early years, how do you reflect on the way the festival has kind of maybe gone from wanting to make architecture visible to maybe then make architectural democratic? To then making architecture inclusive, because some of the themes you have championed, I feel like brought it from the disciplinary scale into the public community scale. Maybe
So
keen to get your thoughts.
maybe I'll go back to earlier what Mankok shared, the aspiration, because it so happened that our theme for the first Archifest was aspiration to realization, right? I think to very large extent, the past 20 years, including when we first started, it's just different facets of how we translate this level of aspiration. Of course, key focus then as the first public architectural festival that's made public. I think the notion of inclusivity is big. All right. We probably can admit a part of our profession, there's this mystic quality, question why is architects always dressed in black? That's like still about what do we do. I think the kind of creative energy exchanges that take place through the course of our day of work. I think the idea was really to allow us to open these doors and welcome a lot more participation. I think this inclusion includes really various segments of our community. So like the festival, we will of course have friends, as I said, established practitioner, overseas, local, but at the same time emerging ones, like Mankok shared. So powerful platform where we were also showcasing I would say emerging thought leaders. The likes of all the celebrities, the current celebrities that you will know now. He mentioned Ma Yen Song. There will be BIG was also featured, I think, in the 2020 or 2021 as one of the group. We had Peter Cook as well. So you have really established one to emerging ones. I believe Jan's year was Fujimoto. No, not Jan's year. I know so Fujimoto was also one of
Spoke
the
early on.
earlier. Yes.
We had Winnie Mas, right?
Yes, Winnie Mas.
Yeah. Came
So and then of course we had Yang Ping Bing. We had even younger Mankok.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. I think so. On that level, there was that level of intellect. I think that discourse, but equally, there were a lot of chances we're creating for even not just younger professionals but also students. We had dedicated sections for students, not just getting them to help chaperone these major speakers. There was Architours where they were empowered to really drive how they would like the cities to be featured, to be showcased. There was a student exhibition as well. I think that was a conscious effort to make sure that there are opportunities for them to exercise their thoughts and actually to be featured. And of course, to the wider public. And what I think is encouraging and probably not so much of reflection sounds a bit uncle, but almost from there, a form of projection is just to see how this various iteration has been evolving over the years.
I think that idea also was something that we carried on this trajectory, right? Because I think when our year 2012, it was also the moment where the idea of participatory design, the idea of activation of public spaces started to pick up, right? It was just that moment where just you could feel the energy that Stella was talking about. Edible Gardens just started.
Yeah.
Right.
The idea of participation, the idea of how do you engage.
So it wasn't just architects telling people how to live,
Yeah.
but also architects starting to ask people how would they want
Exactly.
to live
Want
and be
to.
part of
Yeah.
the process.
Yeah, because you also asked like what were we responding to, right? So I think
Right.
for 2012 that moment was bubbling and we just felt there was that energy, and that was why the theme came to rethink Singapore. We're like, okay, maybe this is the moment where we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to rethink how we shape Singapore? How do we use Singapore?
As a collective.
It's a collective, the public spaces. So that's why when we went outdoors in the pavilion, we were like, let's see how do we use public spaces. Because
Right.
maybe Singaporeans were not that good at using public spaces. We complain about the weather and stuff. And the active programming on the space showed that you can do it. Right? Architecture plus the programming, you combine them, people will hang out. And people will use the city. Right? So I think we were also trying to seed and remind everyone that the city belongs to all of us, right? Like those architects.
Right.
We can shape it, but it's for everyone to use, for everyone to shape together.
Yes.
And speaking of the same headspace, I know that you're all very passionate about the idea of a physical marker of Archifest. And I'm using that not to call it pavilion, because there were other guises. I'm keen, because some years have pavilions, some years have exhibitions, some years don't. I'd love to go around the table. So you spoke about your pavilion, how it was the first, I would call it, official pavilion, or where it was,
And it was
really
outdoor.
deliberately positioned in
Yeah.
a very prominent part of Singapore, and it was meant to be a marker of Archifest, kind of reaching into the community. But you started the idea of a physical, other than events
Marker.
themselves, but a physical marker, built marker. You use the word built environment when you were describing Archifest. So, should Archifest have a pavilion every year? What's your take?
Let's call it a project.
Let's call it a project.
Because I think pavilion itself already too constrained
defines
as an
the
idea,
outcome.
right?
Yeah.
But I think what is important is we should find meaningful projects for every festival, if possible, to demonstrate some of these values and ideas we talk about, relationship of architecture to other disciplines. You know, for example, we talk about public space. It could be a case whereby, simple as designing and build a playground
Right.
that could be seriously used by anyone 65 and above to address our aging society, and play together with, say, 5 years and below, you know, that kind of challenge, right? And because it's also relevant to our social challenges of today, but it also demonstrates how architects and architecture goes beyond just buildings, you know, and public spaces. Actually, we make through our work, we set a canvas to make memories, to instigate certain behaviors. I mean, I always use this extreme example. You want to know how architecture can affect behavior? Look at a prison.
Right.
Okay? Look at a prison. So if you go from, say, a very free play thing like a playground, which literally actually got no enclosures, but it's got planning principles involved, safety and all that, right? All the way to a prison. I think then we are kind of like enlarging and letting people know what architects can do and what they actually contribute to the
it's a
society.
showcase.
Yes. I think having a project to relate to an Archifest is quite important. And I think it's important to meaningfully find that project, what it is all about. Okay? And you can partner with many. Okay, one of the things I like to say is that Archifest, one of the most important things the Archifest brought about is that gathering so many allied professionals, agencies and parks, landscape architects, graphic designers, whatever, together, whereby we realize that design and architecture actually involve so many other
Yeah,
disciplines,
other
right?
disciplines.
Maybe just to again add on and riding from Mangkok's point about this idea of project. So Razvan, your question was, should we have a pavilion? I think what's powerful about, say, the idea of a pavilion is we are able to spatialize and give form to perhaps what is the theme or the subject of discussion. I think that's also a USP of what architects and architecture does, right? It's the ability for you to look at, not just imagine it, but to even experience it. But I'll say through these 20 years, you just see various ways of how this project is conducted. In some years, the leads perhaps felt, and maybe sometimes it's depending on resources, that we ought to have part of this thought spatialized. And perhaps speaking from the 2010 and 2011, that 2 years, or rather that 2 years of Archifest that I had the privilege to drive the project, was it started this earlier. Deep and Stella spoke about this idea of how this form could be, or rather the pavilion could take place, because we had also the really benefit and opportunity to work with one very important partner.
So I wanted to use that opportunity to acknowledge the fact that again, we shouldn't take Archifest for granted. Those out there who have the ability to help Archifest grow, thrive, and keep its vitality will obviously be making a big difference. To change speed a little bit, and we spoke about how Archifest has started, how it's piloted ideas, how some ideas grew from strength to strength. Some things might have been lost in time, maybe they'll resurface again. I'm curious, as we sit here together and reflect on 20 years of Archifest.
Reflect.
And celebrate 20 years of Archifest. Do you think there is something that somehow collectively we didn't manage to address as a topic, or we didn't manage to get done as an initiative, or something that you would love to see future generations of Archifest custodians do or address or tackle or pilot? Because you've all been mavericks in your own right, and you couldn't have done everything back then, but is there anything you think we might have missed, and something that you would love to see done in the future?
I wouldn't put it as you miss, because I think that's a whole idea about an Archifest. There's so many things you can dream of doing, right? But time, resources, and all that would dictate which is of the most important priority that you should do. So I think the beauty about the Archifest is that it's not something that you can say, this is it, the final form and final state of Archifest.
It's not a recipe.
It's not. So every Archifest, I can imagine, every festival director would want to dream of something that is contemporary, relevant, or even looking into the future, right? And that would make things very different every time. And I think that what makes Archifest always interesting and refreshing. So I think that will speak about its attractiveness, that every year the participation is still very good, right?
Very good.
Yeah. So I think that speaks for itself, that there is this kind of an interest, not just architects. Actually, a lot of the people who took part in the Architours, because sometimes they come to my office, I chit-chat with them, oh my God, they are like, how come you are interested in Architours? But people are actually very curious, about architecture in general, right? So I think for me, we don't look at what you could have done more, what you have done less, whatever. I think is to encourage and instigate the future festival directors and our future audience and supporters to keep doing it. Because I think it's very meaningful and very purposeful.
Yeah, to me, I think I mean, over the years it's sort of shifted, and this related to the question before, do we need a physical marker? I think that is important. I think earlier we were also sort of, and not because of what it stands for, showcase that this is the design aspect, you know, like this is the product, but really to go beyond that, and it is a good bridge for industry depth when you bring, you know, like Juma mentioned, architects. You know, I think our year, Thomas Hathaway actually dropped by on 2012 and spoke with James. Yeah, and obviously at that point we were like, oh, okay, you know, and I think these are the conversations that took place outside a conference setting, a very formal.
Right.
It was over drinks. It was over seeing the other parts of city outside of the conference, right? So that bridge, I think, both between the industry depth and I would say the public breadth. So you need both. You need one, the depth, and one, you know, the accessibility, and that I felt is very valuable. You know, you need to continue both depth and breadth.
Both and
The element, and these days, with where we are 20 years later, with social media, you know, taking place, a lot of these conversations we might think do not need to take place in a physical place. But it may not be a pavilion, has a form, but I think we have to move into possibly what other format, what other conversations can take place. Beyond the infrastructure, how do we bring care, or like infrastructure of care? Like, how do we care about the community? How do we care about these important topics and able to bring that spirit of experimentation, which is what we basically did. And I think because we don't know what we don't know, it gave us a certain room to experiment, a bonus to say, let's just try lah.
Being naive is a blessing, and I cannot stress
Do
it
first
enough.
ask for forgiveness later.
If you're always trying to only do the things that you're competent at, how will you ever innovate? And I find that sometimes the most mind-blowing innovations are just fortuitous accidents that either turned out right or they turned out so different from what you intended that everyone learned something new in the process.
I think every edition of Archifest, every edition of the festival director, I think he or she will bring in that energy, I hope. Right? And just ask these questions like, now that there's these 20 years, like what can I bring to the table? What needs to be revisited?
Point you.
Okay, I'll point. 20 years.
I think we still want to come back 20 years later, right? And then still discuss.
So we are saying that we're going to get those pure, innocent, young architects.
Young at heart.
Directors.
Because I think these are the guys that will ask, right, what should we build? Why are we building this? How do we build this? And I think every edition for the past 20 years have been trying to ask this question, right? Like, how do we build? Why are we building? I think like your idea of a project, right, that addresses a very specific condition of the current time. I think 5 years, 10 years from now, the next festival director must ask the same questions. What is the issue that architecture and urban design and planning needs to address now? And then use space and use architecture.
The expertise.
To talk about it.
This is one again, I did highlighted a very key point, and I say it's really, I see it as one of the purposes of Archifest is on the inquiry aspect, the inquisition. So if you, like Razvan to say, oh, were there any kind of things that we have not really touched on? I'll say, in fact, there's actually this somewhat alignment, but it's voluminous. It's not just a single line. It's that we can see across the years this continuation of core themes, role of architects, role of architecture, future of professions, city, community, sustainability, inclusion. You know, this substance, and it's really there. It's just the forms that it was taking, and what's I say very enriching and rich with the way the festival has also evolved and across these years. Really, as I mentioned, the points of views, the POVs, right, and how each festival directors or earlier versions of our organizing chairs to venture into new threads of inquiry. I think that part, and you know, at each point of question, it's contextual, it's relative to time, it's topical. So I think that's also the part that makes it really diverse, but yet relevant, I would say that same form of inquiry will take place and take different forms.
Yeah.
But at least in terms of the spirit, it will be very much the same.
Evolving conversation.
Yes.
Because it was, I mean, in the process of unpacking these 20 years, and I promise I'm not being a lazy curator now, but it's quite amazing to see those early gestating years in the topics, because looking at the traces and evidence of what's there, it's already standing on its own 2 feet on Mary. But I don't want to be guilty of projecting my 2026 view on those years. So I'm curious if you could each take a minute maybe to cast your mind back to your edition or editions, and some of the themes that you tried to explore, and how do you, I think Chi Huang, you put it really beautifully, this idea of kind of contextualizing, extrapolating, ever-evolving discourse. And I think it would be great to maybe reflect on the themes then, and how would you now in 2026 find some of those kind of the relevance of those themes almost refreshed through the lens of what we're dealing with now.
Well, I think being the first edition, I remember even this tagline was a subject of debate, because we're trying to
Every year it is.
kind of like summarize, the whole festival, what is it going to be about. So being the first one, I think, is quite appropriate, So, and that gave us a kind of a framework to start thinking about all the other events, right? So that's why the speakers picked it up. They talk about their practice and early years, formation years, and all that. And I think at the end of the day, we also want to make people realize that what it means, from paper all the way to brick and mortar, that whole process to the general public. So, so I think that was the general idea about the whole Archifest theme, because actually being the first one, you got nothing to follow, no format to follow. You have no precedent studies. So I think it's just gut feel that this is what the people want to get out, get it out there. So I think it was, in a way, it was quite successful in that sense. We even managed to, throw in urban design competition, which is very fitting for that topic. I think it sparks off a kind of awareness. I think to look forward to the next edition and all that. I think that is great, because I think that's what festivals should do. Like after you enjoyed one, you can't wait to buy tickets for the next one, I think that will be the most important kind of a takeaway for every festival, right? And I hope we can build a legion of fans, right? That, this is marked on the calendar, must fly to Singapore, and then holidays will be deferred or rescheduled to be in Singapore, right? For that period. I think that would be great if you can make it into a regional or even international event that people look forward to. Not because of anything, because they're going to have fun, they're going to meet old friends, they're going to see some interesting works, they always say that Singapore is a little test lab, right, for the rest of the world, because we're so small, so compact. Whatever we do, we can experiment, put in sandbox and all that. So can architecture. So I think if we can make it into such an event that people feel good, meet, all the relationship you have built over the years, I think it'll be great. I mean, don't talk about us festival directors being like the last 20 years, right? We got participants that came 20 years ago.
True. Yes.
We should also think about them, if they come for the new next edition, how do they see it,
And that's actually a great arc to
Maybe I
talk
should
about.
do that for my
Yes.
round table. So.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. one action coming out of today's conversation. So, moving on to architecture for humanity, happy cities, and common spaces.
Yeah. So Razvan, and I think what's fun if you see this thread, right, that started with aspiration to realization, man and environment, even to architecture for humanity. That earlier 3 years, I think they were quite kind of broad aspirational topics. Again, very rich discussion took place, and taking on from the last 3 years, I think for 2010, we wanted to push further the relatability of the theme. Hence, this idea of happy cities. And whether it was conscious or not, architecture wasn't played out as one of that big theme. Again, that was also learning from the year of architecture for humanity. That sometimes, the term architecture could sound in itself something already excludes. So we thought 2010, also to a large extent, it was also some of the personal interests and areas of preoccupation with very like-minded peers and friends. Say, okay, again, aspiration, what if the city could do a lot more in generating this idea of happiness, right? And what is fun is projecting 60 years on, this is still a very relevant subject, right? Of course, a continuation of that from the idea of looking at urban spaces, architecture as part of that whole repertoire of this canvas, as Mankok used the word. 2011 was a continuation of this inquiry. And then this is about the spaces in between, about the very soul and the kind of gel that stitch all these various objects and spaces together.
Absolutely. So moving on to your years.
Adit can go first.
So we did Rethink Singapore and Small's Beautiful. Right? So I think I mentioned just now, like Rethink Singapore was also a moment where we were reimagining the role of Archifest. So it started very macro, and then Small's Beautiful, we went really micro. It's like, what's the role of small then, right? Can we celebrate small? But I think I'm just quite inspired by your question about if we were to re-explore these themes today, will it still be relevant, right? So I think one of the things that keep coming back to mind is about if we were to do Rethink Singapore today, 2026, what will that look like? And I think it might be an interesting conversation to have.
Right.
Just because we are in a very different urban development stage, right? Like I think Mankok mentioned about how there's less greenfield sites, a lot of brownfield development. We have to do climate adaptation and mitigation.
Absolutely.
Society changing, geopolitics are changing. So if you just rethink Singapore as a city now in the next 20 years, I think that will be a very interesting conversation. Because some of the things that when we started, it has now become mainstream.
The mainstream,
right?
yeah.
So if you just re-explore that frame in today's context, I think it'll be quite interesting for both the micro and the macro, right? And you start to see all these themes started coming back up again, but just taking slightly different forms. I think that'd be quite cool.
Yeah, I think Adib has summed it up beautifully. And I think the key takeaway was ideas, right? And ideas, be it 20 years ago, be it 20 years later, be it now, it's so relevant. It's like never stop imagining. And the whole idea of the platform, so Small is Beautiful, I think even back then, we were test bidding concept of retail. We had this experience market that was in Dhoby Ghaut. Right. And I remember back then, we couldn't even find 20, our curatorial process meant like 20 basically homegrown business, like the early days of pop-up, so to speak.
Whereas now,
we couldn't even find 20. Remember, I had to where are they? We're not talking. We're not talking about those who go to Chatuchak and buy stuff and come back. There was no kombucha, right?
No sourdough.
Yeah, and things like could the retail experience just be taking place outdoors? Be different, yes, from the mall. And so these were the ideas that even now, I think it's still relevant. I did talk about the relevancy of it. Like with where we are at today, what's happening in the world, right? And how things are going to change. Jobs are at risk because of technology, but yet I think the human spirit, the ability to come together, convene, ideate, right? Small is beautiful. We purposely picked this theme because it was a book that actually inspired us. I came across this book called Small is Beautiful. It's actually written by economists back in the 70s,
Right.
after the oil crisis. Go check it out. This book by E.F. Schumacher, I believe. And then I like, it makes sense, you know, and here we are sometimes very glorified by the bigger is better concept.
Right.
But what about small beginnings and the fact that Singapore, we are a little red dot, and yet we have done these amazing things. And it's not because we wanted to dream to be big. That was, I don't think, the intention. But it's because we wanted to survive, and out of it, as pragmatic people as we are, we could have that resilience, we could have that innovative spirit that our, you know, I guess the earlier generations has paved the way. And we hope the younger ones watching, they would be able to carry on with that spirit, I think, and take the relevance. Happy cities, very important today. I mean, all of us involved in our work day to day, it's a very talk about topic.
Absolutely.
Care, right? Talk about aging, super aged society, and common spaces, wellness. Even then we were flipping we're like the prototype idea of technology. Now we look at it, it was like, oh my God. So I think the analogy that I like to leave behind is, I did mention like, now they are mainstream.
Yeah.
You know, I came from, when I was doing Archifest, I just left a record label career. And I think it was this whole idea of, what's the, you know, underground stuff. In music, we talk about, you know, the alternative and all that. It's like, over the years, it's become mainstream. And yet, it never stopped these alternative movements.
There's always
underground
a
music
reaction
movement.
to the action.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think as long as that happens, I think we will be good lah. Even no matter what challenges come our way.
That's a really positive
Yeah.
note. And also you mentioned the next generation, and it's, you know, you've all been so generous with your time and thoughts. But I couldn't say goodbye just yet before giving you a chance in a kind of succinct and really, really optimistic manner. Maybe leave a thought to the next few festival directors. If there was one thing you would say to them, what would it be? The next generations of festival directors.
We're looking at the younger ones. Stop
why
preparing again.
Right behind the camera there.
Yeah.
But no pressure on you.
Just sign up.
Just sign up.
Yeah.
You're very close to the Nike slogan, but just far enough that we can actually publish it. Just sign up. Jihwan?
I think continue to really celebrate this, I don't know, the city, our community. I think, yeah, I mentioned earlier, to me, the most powerful aspects of Archifest with the various leaders and thought leaders is about the question. Like Deep, Stella, Mankok mentioned, I think each themes, or each of the theme and the various years of themes, to me were questions. And if you've designed that question well, even to this day, at a very different stage of where our society is, the world is, I think these are still very pertinent questions. So keep asking, keep inquiring, of course through the very vehicle of architecture, through our cities, but always include and bring more into this conversation. Yeah, I think that's really the very spirit to fly our Archifest flag high, tall and mighty. Since 2007.
2007.
Don't do that.
I didn't say anything.
Before it flipped to 10, right?
How about between you?
I think if Chiwang said like keep asking questions, I would say while you ask questions, don't ever ask what would past festival directors do. Just ask yourself like what would I do? Right? Get it designed for yourself, for your peers, for your future, right? But your question don't be bogged down by, I think by the time they take over about 25, 30 years, right? So don't be bogged down by this, don't be bogged down by this 30 year legacy or whatever. Just do what you need to do.
Do as if it just started yesterday.
I think for me would be stay curious. You know, I think curiosity, it's something that you have to get out. Get out beyond your looking at stuff on the phone. Go out, observe the cities, stay grounded, get in touch, have conversations. I kept coming back to this, you know, and I think staying curious is something that I think resonates with what Adib said as well. And don't overthink. Don't worry it has to be perfect. I think that is the spirit that continues through the various versions of Archifest that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know, but through doing, we form friendship, and there will always be support, there will always be help. How many times we thought that's it? We don't know whether we will have an opening night.
And yet,
But
like I
yet
said at the
again-
beginning, it's always a minor miracle.
Yeah.
That's
that
right.
happens every year.
Yes. So
Well-
keep the faith going, and yeah.
On that not overthinking it note, I will not overthink the way to wrap this up. So I'll just thank you all so much for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you,
in each other's
Razvan.
company. And to everyone watching, I hope you enjoyed this ArchitectuREAL, a special edition celebrating 20 years of Archifest. Please like it, subscribe to the Singapore Institute of Architects series, and stay tuned for the next conversation.
Buy the tickets. Buy the book. Buy the booklets.
Buy the booklets. Anything else?
And just show up.
Show up.
Participate, have fun.